Coral reefs are the rainforests of the sea, prized for their beauty and resources the world over. They are also one of the Earth's most vulnerable ecosystems, at threat to climate change, and no place better symbolises their importance and their plight than Australia's Great Barrier Reef. This is TechKnow, a show about innovations that can change lives. We're going to explore the intersection of hardware and humanity, and we're doing it in a unique way. This is a show about science by scientists.
Okay, so this commotion that you see behind me is a bunch of people getting ready to dive in the Great Barrier Reef for the first time, much like me.
TechKnow's Marita Davison travelled to Queensland to see firsthand one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, and to explore the scientific efforts to save it.
Ask 1,000 different people to describe what makes Australia's Great Barrier Reef special, and you'll get 1,000 different answers, and sometimes none at all. Just a bemused silence, a nod to the fact that there exist things on this earth so beautiful they defy description. And yet, for all its capacity to inspire us on an intimate level, it's when we step back that we are even more amazed. The Great Barrier Reef covers 345,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Germany. It stretches 2,300 kilometers in length, nearly equal to the entire coastline of Chile. And it's the only living structure on Earth that can be seen from space. And therein lies its vulnerability. Because it lives, it can also die. Although coral reefs cover less than 2% of the ocean floor, 25% of all marine life depend on them for their survival. And yet, according to the World Resources Institute, by the year 2050, nearly all coral reefs worldwide, including the Great Barrier Reef, will be threatened with death. A scientific prediction that, if correct, will mean the disappearance of one of the Earth's most vital and enduring ecosystems within most of our lifetimes. Off the coast of northeastern Australia, where the Great Barrier Reef meets the shallows, I meet with Ove Hogue Goldberg, director of the Global Change Institute at the University of Queensland. For him, a hope for the best approach is no longer on the table.
I mean, in world wars, we're quite willing to spend half of our disposable income solving a problem. This is as big or even bigger than a world war, and we need to get those sort of resources, and we need to get everyone behind the solutions.
Solutions to problems that are becoming legion.
There are multiple stresses that face coral reefs like the Great Barrier Reef. There's sediments and nutrients flowing down rivers and smothering corals and other organisms. There has been too much fishing in some cases where we've knocked out key species. But the real showstoppers now are the global changes that we're inflicting on coral reefs.
And it's the showstoppers that could be potentially catastrophic. According to the World Resources Institute, the absorption of an increased level of atmospheric carbon dioxide into the oceans has caused them to become more acidic. This change in water chemistry inhibits the ability of corals, whose skeletons are composed of calcium carbonate, to grow. An increase in carbon dioxide emissions has also led to trapped atmospheric heat, which in turn has led to higher water temperatures. Warmer water disrupts the symbiotic relationship that a coral has with a microalgae called zooxanthellae. The zooxanthellae is responsible for the coral's food supply, and when it leaves, the coral begins to starve. The effect turns the coral white and is known as coral bleaching. The heart of the problem is this. Scientific models show both ocean acidification and ocean temperatures spiking to unprecedented levels over the next 100 years. Levels that, without intervention, would spell the end of coral reefs. It was against this backdrop that in 2016, the Great Barrier Reef experienced one of the most severe bleaching episodes ever recorded. Initial surveys by researchers at the ARC Center of Excellence for Coral Reef Studies put the areas affected by bleaching at 93%, and estimates about the resulting mortality figures ran the gamut. Few climate-related events in history have captured the media and the public's attention more. It included an obituary for the Great Barrier Reef that quickly went viral. It sent the GBR's tourism industry into an uproar and even gave the scientific community pause. An actual mortality survey conducted in late 2016, also by the ARC Center of Excellence for Coral Reef Studies, proved a mixed bag. The northern third of the reef was devastated, losing an estimated 65% of live coral coverage. But the lower two-thirds of the reef, the area where the vast majority of reef tourism occurs, escaped relatively unharmed, spared by cooler waters from the Coral Sea. Just outside the city of Townsville, which sits at the southern tip of the Great Barrier Reef, a group of scientists are fighting to save coral reefs, not just from bleaching events now, but from the effects of climate change yet to come.
One of the goals of marine research in a time of global change is to gain insight into how marine systems, like the Great Barrier Reef, may look into the future. To achieve this, researchers need to replicate and manipulate ocean conditions in controlled environments. In other words, literally bringing the ocean into the lab. And that is exactly what is being done at the most advanced research aquarium in the world, Australia's National Sea Simulator.
A $35 million facility completely dedicated to tropical marine research. For a scientific discipline whose researchers are used to working with simple tubs of water, CSIM is nothing short of revolutionary.
It's giving us the opportunity to do research that we've not been able to do before.
Dr. Nicole Webster is one of the lead coral scientists working at CSIM.
In the past, if we were to try and do an experiment about climate change, we might get some corals and stick them in these sort of small nally bin sized tanks and heat them up a little bit. But it doesn't really very closely reflect what's actually happening out on the reef.
And the driving idea behind CSIM is that if you have the tools and technology to accurately reflect conditions on the reef today, then you can accurately replicate what conditions on the reef will look like tomorrow.
Yeah, so we've got a number of tanks here. What's going on?
This is our newest experiment, which we're calling Evolution 21, and it's about trying to assess what's going to happen in terms of evolution in the 21st century. We've got these really large tanks which enable us to establish these mesocosms. And what a mesocosm is it's not just one particular species of coral. We've got all of these things in the tanks simultaneously. So we've got corals, we've got some giant clams in the tanks, we've got sea urchins.
So you're essentially trying to recreate the ecosystem but under controlled conditions so that you can then manipulate the things you're interested in.
That's right, and what we're interested in manipulating for this experiment is the temperature and the PCO2. So as part of global climate change, sea surface temperatures are rising, the oceans are becoming more acidic. So what this experiment is we're looking at current day conditions, and then we're looking at conditions which are projected by the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, conditions which are projected for the year 2050, and then conditions which are projected for the year 2100.
3 sets of tanks. One, an ambient tank that reflects temperature and pH conditions as they exist on the reef today. A second that reflects those conditions for the year 2050. And a third that reflects the predicted conditions in 2100. But the level of control and detail in the system goes beyond even that.
Now tell me a little bit about the tanks that we're looking at here. I know this is our ambient tank, and then you're manipulating temperature and carbon dioxide. So tell me, give me some of the stats here.
Okay, so the ambient tank is set at about 410 parts per million carbon dioxide, which is current reef conditions. So to generate our ambient values, we've taken the last 10 years of temperature data, and we've averaged that, and that for this day is about 29.4 degrees or something like that. So that would be the temperature at this particular time on this particular day in the ambient conditions.
And then how are you manipulating the conditions off of your baseline here in your other treatments?
So the 3 carbon dioxide conditions are 410, 680, which is what's being projected for CO2 parts per million for 2050, and then 900 for 2100. So that's what's being projected by the IPCC. With the temperature, we take the temperature values from our ambient tank and then we apply a +1 degree offset for our 2050 set of conditions and a +2 degree offset for our 2100 conditions.
That level of control and manipulation is available to every experimental room at the CSIM facility and all of their tanks. It's a system that requires nearly 100 kilometers of piping, 700 to 800,000 liters of new seawater daily, and a computer system that not only must keep water temperatures and pH levels accurate to within 100th of 1%, but also controls it all through the touch of a button. Keeping it all running 24/7 is the job of Operations Manager Craig Humphrey.
So just for example, I'll bring up an experiment that is looking at climate change and ocean acidification. So the example here is that we have the temperature one. Each one of these rectangles represents a tank with an organism in it, a coral or a sponge.
Okay, so these are some of the tanks that we've already looked at. Then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So temperature one is indicated by these colour rectangles. Each colour represents a different pH.
Okay, so
a
different concentration of CO2.
Yes, exactly. So what we have in this room, we have 4 different temperatures, we have 4 different pHs, and every combination. So there's 16 different waters running into this room. So I'll just select temperature 3, for example, and you can see that the rectangles have changed, and that's just representative of another tank.
But all of the cutting-edge research that CSIM's technology and engineering now allows, ultimately, one thing stands out.
We've never been able to run such long-term experiments because the quality of the water and the quality of the controls weren't sophisticated enough that we could actually produce offspring.
After all, it's not whether the corals on the reef today will be able to adapt and exist on the reefs of 2050 and 2100. It's whether their descendants will. Researchers are seeking to determine not just whether corals can be conditioned to withstand future ocean conditions, but whether those manipulated corals can pass those survival traits on to future generations. The process is known as assisted evolution.
So the main goal of the Assisted Evolution project is to develop coral stock that has enhanced resilience to climate change. So it's better to withstand higher temperature, ocean acidification. If we can, perhaps make stronger skeletons, faster growing corals. In an ideal world, all of the above.
Madeline Van Oppen is a principal research scientist at Ames and leads its Assisted Evolution program.
And how are you going about this? Walk me through some of the nuts and bolts of how this research goes about.
We are crossing different species of coral. The rationale is that will likely provide new characteristics to that particular individual. What we do then is we grow these hybrid corals under predicted future ocean conditions and basically have natural selection pick those individuals that perform particularly well.
Now, I'm really curious about this. How do you go about the cross-fertilization? What are the mechanics involved in breeding a coral?
Yeah. So first of all, we need to send a team out to the reef to collect coral colonies that have mature eggs. So we need to go around and pick those colonies that are ready to go.
As seen in this video, shot at regular speed, the collected coral colonies are brought back to the sea simulator to spawn. The corals package both sperm and egg into what are called bundles. When they are ready to release, the coral pushes the bundles through the mouth openings of their polyps, creating a distinct visual image.
And they start looking like Christmas trees, like decorated Christmas trees. That's really what they look like. So once it releases those bundles, they float to the surface of the bin, and we can just scoop them up from the surface. It's very simple, it's not high tech. And then we bring them into our larval rearing area.
The bundles are then separated into sperm and egg and crossbred according to the breeding match scientists wish to attain. Selected sperm and egg are reintroduced to each other through an in vitro process. 2 hours later, fertilization is complete, and what are now coral larvae are moved into rearing tanks, where Dr. Lena Bay looks after them while they are at their most vulnerable.
So, point out to me what I'm looking at. I mean, these look like little dust particles, but they're baby coral, is that right?
That's exactly right, and each one of those can grow into a full adult coral if they're lucky enough to find the right spot on the reef and that they have the right conditions.
So they're 4 days old.
That's great.
What's going to happen to them next?
So now we're going to take these small larvae and we're going to actually expose them to very hot temperatures to see whether we can identify the winners under these conditions. So pull out the really tolerant individuals from this bunch in here.
All right, and you're doing that just next door?
Just over here.
All right, so baby coral go from those tanks over there and they wind up here?
Yeah, that's right. So we have the nursery on one side and over here is the sauna. So this is essentially where we expose the larvae to very warm water. And we do that for about 2 or 3 days to see which ones survive.
Not all corals spawned in the lab are crossbred. Some are simply manipulated or evolved, but the end game is the same.
All right, so this is one of the rooms where you have an experiment running.
Yep.
And I see these little plugs with teeny tiny little coral. Why are these guys so important?
This little coral is about a year old, but it was initially, it settled as a larva that was bred here in the sea simulator. And hopefully in about another 2 years, this coral will actually be able to reproduce itself.
Now, with the project that you have going on, I mean, it seems to me like it's very solutions oriented, right? I mean, a lot of the time, you know, scientists are documenting the decline of a system, and that can be a very demoralizing thing to do. But in this case, you're trying to come up with a solution here. What is, in your opinion, what is the end game of your research? What is the final result here? Are you driven to action?
Oh yeah, we're absolutely driven to action. And the thinking is first that we could improve the success of coral reef restoration initiative. But also we hope that we will be able to increase resilience of relatively healthy reef systems by breeding maybe some of those, you know, enhanced corals and, you know, releasing them into that environment and breeding with the native corals. You know, we would hope that that would increase resilience generally in reefs that are not so negatively impacted yet.
For Ove Ho Goldberg, the threat to coral reefs goes beyond simply the concerns of scientists.
Then you take what coral reefs represent to people. And this is the amazing numbers, right? So there's an estimated 500 million people on the planet who come to coral reefs almost on a daily basis to get food and income. You know, that's about 1 in every 12 people that is dependent on coral reefs worldwide.
4 hours north of the Ames facility is the port city of Cairns, the primary maritime gateway to the Great Barrier Reef.
More than 2 million people visit the Great Barrier Reef every year, many of them beginning their tour right here. And that's what we're here to do, to see the reef through the eyes of those who make it an economic engine as well as an ecological wonder.
Paul McKenzie is the executive director of the Association of Marine Park Tourism Operators. His job is to represent the interests of the GBR's tourism industry, both with the government and with the scientific community.
Look, there is no doubt that tourism is the backbone of the Cairns region, and that's underpinned by the fact that something like just in Cairns there's 16,000 people employed in the marine tourism industry. Across the whole industry, it's a $6 billion industry and employs about 63,000 people.
So $6 billion industry, that's huge. That's $6 billion a year, yeah?
$6 billion a year just to Queensland, yep.
In the especially last couple of years with the follow-up of a huge bleaching event that was reported in the media, you know, the Great Barrier Reef has really received a lot of attention. Yep. What do you think about all that publicity that's coming your way?
Look, a lot of the publicity was incredibly negative and also untruthful. We had stories of 93% of the reef being dead and dying, and we've seen stories where people have written the obituary for the Great Barrier Reef.
How has that impacted the tourism activities and the perception of tourism here in Cairns?
Look, the bleaching event happened this year so late in the season that most people had already booked their trips to come out. So we've had a really good tourism season. I worry about next year. And next year is where the people that were sitting in America or in Europe are going to be going, oh, should we go to the Barrier Reef, should we go somewhere else?
The morning that I choose to go see the reef for myself starts off ominously. A squall pushes through Cairns, luckily blowing out just as quickly as it blew in. Like the thousands of travelers from around the world do each day, I book a trip on one of the Reef Fleet's boats. The vessel is the Reef Kist. The captain is Mark Palbart.
The reef we're going to today is Briggs Reef. It's 30 nautical miles southeast of Cairns. The site we go to on Briggs Reef is about 6 metres deep, perfect for intro dives, but all around Briggs Reef is water that's 35 to 40 metres deep. So you have this nice cold water that's coming up in the reef, bringing all these nutrients into the reef. An excellent site for fish. It's like swimming in an aquarium.
The trip out to Briggs Reef is about an hour and 40 minutes. And without landmarkers, it's seemingly a trip to the middle of the ocean. Until you arrive and the water settles, and you are able to see just under the surface and the perspective of where you are, and how large it is begins to settle in. Once we're moored, it's a simple equation. The quicker you get in the water, the more time you get to spend there. Okay, so this commotion that you see behind me is a bunch of people getting ready to dive in the Great Barrier Reef for the first time, much like me. This is a working dive boat that we're on right now. The Great Barrier Reef is one of the world's natural treasures, a gem for sure. I'm super privileged that I'm about to dive off the boat, get to dive there, check out the amazing coral reef. It's a bucket list that I'll check off for sure. From above the water's surface, the Great Barrier Reef appears majestic, but still. The corals looking like rocks, for which they are often mistaken. It's when you get beneath the surface of the water that you are truly able to appreciate what's meant by the phrase, rainforest of the sea. We are diving in the middle third of the Great Barrier Reef, which has been largely spared the devastation felt by the GBR's northern third. There are signs of bleaching, but overall, the reef is beautiful and full of life. For myself, it's especially rewarding to see the contents of the Ames mesocosms, full life, out in their natural environment. So I am the absolute last person out of the water. It was amazing down there. We saw fan corals, brain corals, we saw all sorts of fish, giant clams. I probably could have stayed there for another couple of hours, but it's exhausting. Lunch beckons, and off we go. We returned to Cairns with the rest of the Reef Fleet and the thousands of tourists they ferried to one of the world's natural wonders. For many, it was their first time visiting the GBR. The looming question, will this generation be the last who are able to do so? For those who seek to save the reef through science, and for those whose livelihoods depend upon it, the answer is no, provided that action is taken.
If we continue on our current pathway, where we're pumping CO2 into the atmosphere, we're acidifying the oceans, we won't have coral reefs within 20, 30, 40 years from now.
Business as usual is going to be devastating, but even if we do something to halt or to mitigate some of the impacts of climate change, we're, as a human society, going to have to live with the fact that we're going to lose a lot of coral reefs. Is that right?
We're going to lose a lot of coral reefs. There's no doubt about it. Even if we followed the Paris Agreement, where we cut greenhouse gases such that temperatures don't rise above 2 degrees, they're kept well below, it's estimated we'll still lose 90% of coral reefs. But the important thing is that if we don't fulfill the Paris Agreement, coral reefs won't survive.
At all?
They won't. No, mid-century they're gone.
And I think that we're going to have a good, healthy reef out there for the next 5, 10 years, maybe even longer, even if we don't do much more than what we're currently doing. But if we really want to come to grips with it, we've got to slow down the climate warming. We want people to think that there is some hope for the Barrier Reef, and there is. There's plenty of hope.
I feel there is hope. I think that our species is incredible in the trouble it can cause, but it's also incredible in terms of the solutions and the fixes that it can find. There are solutions, and the Great Barrier Reef is still, savable. Most of it we can save, but we've got to start now, and it's with those solutions that we've got to really, hit hard.
While the Great Barrier Reef's obituary may have been written prematurely, those calling for action on its behalf feel a heed to their warnings are long overdue. Whether science and society can answer that call in time is something the future, the near future, will tell. For TechKnow, I'm Dr. Shini Somara. See you next time.